Gaza's health ministry says over 280 Palestinians died from starvation since the war began. Israel announces the conclusion of its airstrikes on Yemen after targeting key infrastructure. And Zelensky says Ukraine is now using domestically produced long-range weapons to strike targets inside Russia.
والله العظيم ولا حبة رز، والله العظيم ولا حبة عدس. ما فيش أكل، ما فيش شرب، عندي بنت 2.5 صارت تصدم.
Gaza's health ministry said that 289 Palestinians died from starvation since the war began, including 115 children. Munir al-Burj, the ministry's director, said that 8 more people, among them a child, died in the past 24 hours due to food shortages. He warned that Gaza is in a race against time to confront famine and denounced Israel's prevention of residents from accessing health care as an intolerable violation. Hamas has asserted that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's approval of the Gaza occupation plan, despite their acceptance of mediator proposals, reveals his intent to obstruct any agreement. Hamas confirmed that they agreed to a partial deal and showed readiness for a comprehensive one. Yet, Netanyahu rejects all solutions. Hamas added that Israeli and American admissions identify Netanyahu as the primary obstacle to detainee exchanges and ceasefire efforts. Former U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller acknowledged Netanyahu's repeated delays and new demands whenever agreements neared completion. Hamas insists that a ceasefire is the sole path towards securing detainees' release and holds Netanyahu fully responsible for their fate. Civil defense teams have conducted 41 rescue operations in the past 24 hours amid ongoing Israeli strikes. In northern Gaza, injured civilians were taken to Sheikh Radwan Clinic and Al-Shifa Hospital. Firefighters extinguished a blaze at a home in Asqula neighborhood of Gaza City and recovered a body from the port. Teams also assessed damage in the An-Nunu building and Nasr neighborhood, where multiple casualties were reported. Central Gaza saw a fire at a diesel factory near Abu Asi station being put out, and a body was recovered following a strike near Al-Tawba Mosque. In Khan Yunis, rescuers saved a child from a sewage well and recovered victims from a damaged displacement tent. Injured individuals were taken to the Nasser Medical Complex, while in Rafah, 3 patients were transferred to Cross and British hospitals. The World Health Organization, WHO, has confirmed the release of one of its Gaza staff members who had been detained by Israel since July the 21st. The WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom expressed relief on X, calling for the protection of all health and humanitarian workers. In July, Israeli military attacks damaged WHO staff residence and main warehouse in Deir el-Balah, central Gaza, leading to the detention of 2 WHO staff members and 2 family members. 3 were released earlier, with 1 remaining detained until now. The WHO has warned that Gaza's health sector is on its knees, facing critical shortages of fuel, medical supplies, and staff amid ongoing mass casualty incidents. And for more analysis, we now move to Mark Summers, who is in our newsroom. To you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Hel. We're joined now from Ramallah by the Professor of Political Science at Al-Quds University, Dr. Ayman Al-Raqab. Thank you very much for being here with us on Q News. So Hamas has made allegations that Netanyahu is intentionally hindering ceasefire talks and the prisoner exchanges. Do you think that these accusations by Hamas are accurate?
Hello, everyone. Actually, in the past week, there have been Egypt has mediated for Hamas to accept the USA's proposal, Witkoff's proposal, and after Hamas's acceptance, the occupation once again giving conditions to reach a ceasefire. There was a absolute acceptance before, but now they are an obstacle, and so going back to have them accept, we need new proposals. And yeah, we need also mediators to include Hamas and Israel. We need to hear Netanyahu's conditions for a ceasefire, but we aren't hearing Hamas's proposal for this ceasefire. So yes, there are, and what's really risky and dangerous is Israel's stance after the statements that they said from the, and so this means that Israelis and Americans are against the Palestinians.
Okay, and do you think that diplomatic pressure could influence Israel's handling of this humanitarian emergency? It doesn't seem so far.
I think that the IPC statement and the UN statement about the presence of a famine, this should pressure Israel enough, actually. But as usual, Israel doesn't care about these kind of things, and yeah, naturally, Israel started attacking them and calling these lies, and but they started allowing a little bit more of aid, and so we're talking about the need of more than 1 million convoys that we need to enter Gaza, and so yes, they are trying to protect themselves, and they are planning to have a siege for 2 months, starving them and pressuring them, forcing them south so that they can have their operations without any obstacles. And so yes, the occupation forces are doing atrocities and war crimes without any humanity, and the statements from the envoys that have talked about Western companies supporting the Israeli occupation forces, like technology companies and food companies, and so we have also other factors that keep giving Israel more power. And we cannot talk about the Prime Minister of the Netherlands that clearly said that he cannot impose sanctions on Israel, but he took a stance.
Indeed, yes, the Foreign Minister in the Netherlands did so just a few days ago. And of course, we've had the UN's official declaration of famine in Gaza now, and we've seen famines in different countries over previous decades. This one, they say, is man-made. Are these pronouncements from the UN going to have any effect, any change on global attitudes?
Israel doesn't listen to them, and they don't respect such things. Like when they had memorandum of, we have the USA has statements and they are holding the judges that have such outcomes. And so I don't think that Israel that is totally disrespectful to the whole region will actually listen to the UN. And so yes, we the legitimacy of the occupation isn't just about one decision or one talk from the UN. You know, they have killed lots of people, they have occupied most of the land, and so their legitimacy is them refusing the presence of an Arab country. So I don't think that they care about the UN, or they would have acted differently and haven't done such horrendous atrocities. And yeah, you know, with tearing the city and the starvation, they need to kick them. They need to be kicked out, but they have USA support and other Western countries, and so they keep on doing with what they do.
Well, that was Professor of Political Science at Al-Quds University, Dr. Ayman Al-Raqab. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Qnews. And now it's back to you, Hal.
Thank you very much, Mark. Mohammed Abu Salmiya, director of Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City, has warned that an Israeli invasion of the city would be disastrous for its 1.2 million residents. He highlighted the hospital's daily struggle as it receives hundreds of wounded and dozens of slain Palestinians amid a health system on the brink of collapse. Abu Salmiya condemned the ongoing Israeli operations, describing them as leading to starvation and mass casualties. He urged the international community to wake up and pressure Israel to halt what he called genocide and starvation in Gaza. The head of the Children's Department at Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Younis has said that the health crisis in southern Gaza has reached a catastrophic level, with the hospital unable to cope with rising cases of malnutritioned children. Dr. Ahmad Al-Farra said that 25 children are currently in critical condition, with some forced to lie on the floor due to a lack of beds. He warned that between 60,000 and 75,000 children in southern Gaza are at risk of malnutrition, calling the figures horrifying and unprecedented. The malnutrition clinic, open only 2 days a week, receives more than 120 cases in a few hours, 10 times the normal rate. Palestinian farmers in Al-Mughayr, a village in the northern West Bank, assess the damage to their olive groves after Israeli forces uprooted hundreds of trees during a 3-day military operation. The raid involved closing off village entrances, searching homes, and damaging farmland. Local council member Marzouk Abu Naim said that over 2,000 dunams were being razed and hundreds of olive trees destroyed by both Israeli forces and settlers. The Israeli army said that 3,100 trees were cleared to improve defenses and that engineering operations continue. Israeli Central Command Chief Avi Bluth warned that every village and every what he described as enemy would face consequences for attacks, naming Al-Mughayr as a particular focus. Gaza's director of ambulance and emergency services has said that Israeli occupation forces are preventing rescue crews from reaching areas hit by airstrikes. He said that displaced civilians have nowhere safe to go, while hospitals remain damaged and face severe shortages of supplies and staff. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders has accused U.S. President Donald Trump of failing to act on what he called Israel's man-made famine in Gaza. In a post on X, Sanders wrote, "President Trump has the power to end the starvation of the Palestinian people. Instead, he is doing nothing while watching this famine unfold." He added that enough is enough and no more American taxpayer dollars to Netanyahu's war machine. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory, has outlined urgent steps states must take to halt what she called Israel's genocide in Gaza. She called for a full arms embargo on Israel and urged countries to deploy navies carrying aid to break the blockade of the Strip. Albanese also said that the UN General Assembly should establish a protection presence in Gaza, citing its authority to act when the Security Council is paralyzed by vetoes. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, has said that tens of thousands of children in Gaza are continuing their education despite famine and war, with classrooms turned into shelters. In its Keep Us Learning campaign, UNRWA highlighted the resilience of teachers and students. One child, Lynn, said that she lost her home, school and everything, but she asserted that she will not lose knowledge because she really loves to study. UNRWA appealed for urgent support to sustain education, stressing that learning offers children hope amid devastation. A recent survey by the Israel National Institute for Security Studies has revealed growing concern among Israelis over the country's war in Gaza and its international repercussions. Conducted from August 11th to the 14th, the poll found that 66.5% of Israelis fear potential international isolation due to the conflict. Additionally, 65% doubt that the fighting will help secure the release of detainees, while 43% believe that the war is not advancing the government's stated objectives. About 61% said that the return of captives is only possible through a negotiated agreement and an end to the war. The survey also highlighted worries about democracy, with 67% expressing concern about Israel's democratic future. Israeli strikes have hit the Yemeni capital Sana'a. Israeli media reported that the Israeli Air Force launched a series of airstrikes on the Yemeni capital Sana'a, targeting Houthi positions. According to Reuters, these strikes focused on areas near the presidential complex and missile bases. An Israeli military source confirmed that the attacks were carried out in response to missiles launched by the Houthis. The airstrikes also hit civilian facilities, including the central Hizayas power station and an oil company in Sana'a. Israeli sources identified the presidential palace as a primary target, with at least 3 sites being bombed in total. The Israeli occupation army has confirmed that its air force conducted strikes on Yemen's capital Sana'a, targeting key military and infrastructure sites. The operation focused on a military complex within the presidential palace, 2 power stations and a fuel storage facility. Army officials said that the strikes were in response to repeated Houthi attacks on Israel and its citizens. Over 10 fighter jets took part in the operation, launching more than 35 missiles and shells. The army stated that the bombing of authority sites like the presidential palace was intended as a direct message to the Houthis. Military sources denied that assassinations were part of the operation. A senior Houthi official has condemned Israel's airstrikes on the Yemeni capital Sana'a, saying that the attacks targeted densely populated residential areas and unstaffed government buildings, including the presidential headquarters. The official accused Israel of trying to compensate for its military losses and labeled the targeting of civilian sites a war crime. He warned that Houthi forces would escalate their operations and could strike deeper into Israeli territory. The official also claimed that air defenses intercepted part of the Israeli assault and warned that if U.S. involvement in the strikes is confirmed, Houthi forces would retaliate by targeting American interests. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that Ukraine is now using domestically produced long-range weapons to strike targets inside Russia and is no longer coordinating such operations with the United States. Zelensky noted that earlier discussions with Washington about retaliatory strikes were a long time ago and are no longer relevant. His remarks came days after a Wall Street Journal report claimed that U.S. had been blocking Ukraine from using American-supplied arms for cross-border attacks. Zelensky also addressed tensions with Hungary following recent Ukrainian drone strikes on a Russian oil pipeline, saying that future relations with Hungary now depend on Budapest's position. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has said in Kiev that he would not rule out the deployment of Canadian troops to Ukraine as part of long-term security guarantees being developed between Ukraine and its allies. Speaking alongside President Volodymyr Zelensky on Ukraine's Independence Day, Carney announced that over $723 million in military aid from a previously pledged package would be delivered next month. Zelensky, addressing dignitaries at Kiev's historic Sofia Square, reaffirmed his commitment to a future where Ukraine's peace is guaranteed. Russia and Ukraine have exchanged 146 prisoners of war from each side on Sunday, August the 24th, in a deal mediated by the United Arab Emirates. According to Russia's defense ministry, the released Russian soldiers were transferred to Belarus, where they are receiving medical and psychological support. In addition, Ukraine handed over 8 Russian civilians from the Kursk region. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has said that Russia has made significant concessions towards a negotiated settlement in the Ukraine conflict, including security guarantees for Ukraine's territorial integrity. Vance noted Russia's acceptance that it won't install a puppet regime in Kiev. He added that economic sanctions would be applied selectively to encourage progress, citing President Trump's recent tariff on Indian goods linked to Russian oil purchases as an example of leverage.
And that's what the President of the United States is doing every single day.
Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov has accused Western countries of deliberately obstructing negotiations to resolve the Ukrainian crisis. Lavrov criticized Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky for stubbornly imposing preconditions on any meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Complicating diplomatic efforts, Lavrov expressed Russia's hope to thwart these Western attempts to hinder a peaceful settlement, emphasizing Moscow's commitment to pursuing dialogue despite external interference. The statements highlight ongoing diplomatic deadlock and the challenges posed by both Western opposition and Ukrainian demands in efforts to find a resolution to the conflict.
Говорили о том, что да, необходимо что-то делать, необходимо двигаться.
Norway has announced that it will contribute around 7 billion Norwegian crowns or around $696 million in air defense systems to Ukraine in a joint effort with Germany. The Norwegian Prime Minister has said that his country, in partnership with Germany, is working to ensure Ukraine receives advanced air defense systems. The support package includes funding for 2 Patriot systems and missiles, as well as contributions towards radar technology from German and Norwegian companies. The aid is intended to strengthen Ukraine's defenses against continued Russian air attacks. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced the removal of most retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, aiming to improve relations and advance a new trade deal. While tariffs on U.S. auto, steel and aluminum will temporarily remain, the move is a reciprocal response to the United States' decision not to impose tariffs on Canadian products that comply with the USMCA agreement. The Canadian dollar has strengthened following this news. Carney's decision, however, could present a political challenge at home, where his government faces criticism for a more moderate approach. Later, U.S. President Donald Trump praised Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's decision to lift many retaliatory tariffs on American goods. He called the move nice and said that he plans to speak with Carney again soon, noting that their earlier positive call. This development marks a potential thaw in the long-standing trade and security dispute between the two nations, which have been at an impasse for months. The Indian Foreign Minister has stated that trade negotiations with the U.S. continue, but New Delhi has red lines to defend, especially concerning its farmers and small producers. This comes just before new U.S. tariffs on Indian goods, spurred by India's purchase of Russian oil, are set to take effect. A planned visit by U.S. trade negotiators to New Delhi has been cancelled, dampening hopes for a resolution. South Africa's agriculture sector is heavily burdened by new U.S. tariffs, which average 30% and threaten the income and employment of farmers. A top official stated that the tariffs particularly harm citrus and wine exports and could force small farmers out of the market. In response, the South African government is both negotiating with the U.S. and actively pursuing a trade diversification strategy with Asian countries to reduce its vulnerability. The southern resort city of Sanya has suspended public transport and closed business as typhoon approaches, bringing strong winds and heavy rain. Over 30,000 fishing boats were ordered ashore and more than 20,000 residents evacuated. The city issued a red typhoon alert, the highest in China's warning system, and activated its top-level emergency response. Authorities warned that the storm could make landfall in Hainan province or pass along the coast towards Vietnam. U.S. Coast Guard crews were seen training in heavy surf off the North Carolina coast shortly after Hurricane Erin moved out into the Atlantic. The USGC emphasized the need to remain ready to respond in all weather. Hurricane Erin, now downgraded to a post-tropical cyclone, continues to pose risks. The National Hurricane Center warned that strong currents and rough surf remain a danger at beaches along the U.S. East Coast through the weekend. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we have been covering. Gaza's health ministry says over 280 Palestinians died from starvation since the war began. Israel announces the conclusion of its airstrikes on Yemen after targeting key infrastructure. And Zelensky says Ukraine is now using domestically produced long-range weapons to strike targets inside Russia. And this concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. My name is Halal Hamalawi. I thank you so much for being with us. Stay tuned for more updates on Q News.